Is it 29th? Yeah, it is actually. Yeah, that's right. Yesterday was Marcus Goldfinch's birthday. I celebrate my stalker's birthday every year by sending him a custom birthday card digitally, which I don't know if he gets them because I'm blocked. It's just like, it's kind of ironic, like I end up stalking my stalkers in the aggregate more than they've ever stalked me. And this stalker has been in my life longer than anybody, other than like my family. I've had him as a stalker longer than I've had any friends. So I guess we're going on our 8th year in this relationship. Anyway, in the last 4 months, actually, this is actually more recent. Right after the Charlie Kirk thing, he hacked into 9 of my social medias and 1 of my banks. And I used ChatGPT to write letters to the legal departments of each of these companies, which got me the accounts right back, and also got their inclusion in the associated IC3 FBI reports. So what I've been told is that he didn't get into my bank account, but he tried. But the attempt itself is actually felonious. So he's committed multiple felonies. And this is just in the last couple of months. It's interesting, somebody noted, that he started this the day of Charlie Kirk's shooting. And the theory here, because I didn't notice, I wasn't paying attention. I wasn't paying attention to any of these old social media accounts because if I don't promote it, I'm probably not updating it. But I did notice that there were attempts to get into my Instagram. And anyway, my point of it is, I didn't notice because I was too busy analyzing the Squib show. And when I finally got around to fixing it, someone said, hey, isn't this the same guy who seemed to have been attached to you as soon as you got national media attention with Mad Mike? I was like, oh, you know what? That's probably it. Because this guy works at the White House, and he seemingly has been attached to some sort of, some kind of a gatekeeper, more or less, in the conspiracy realm. But he's associated with a lot of big accounts. He's friends with Eddie Bravo and Joe Rogan and Alex Jones, but he's always behind the scenes. But he does seem to have that role, and his attempt to run me off back then using the same tactics didn't quite work. In fact, I was kind of thinking about moving on and getting back into telemarketing in 2018, but he had gone out of his way to sabotage my reputation with former employers. Even in the funeral industry, he contacted everybody and he sent them dossiers. So he created a lot of havoc for me, so I decided to stick around. So it's kind of ironic, if he hadn't taken it out of the internet, I wouldn't be here. But he re-incriminated himself. There's no way he's going to get away with anything. Statute of limitations isn't going to help him. And extradition is something they will do. But the problem is, he's one of them. So how do I win this? It's very much like a long-term project, but I'm in a better position right now than ever with these recent crimes and multiple witnesses, because every legal department with every one of these social media accounts and have email exchanges are witnesses to the commissions of these crimes. And Perplexity AI has been tremendously helpful in writing legal notices, even legal research. But yeah, basically, it's just a matter of time. I'll get to him. And when he gets taken in, I mean, he's going to have to pay statutory damages for all sorts of things. The court will assign damages, and that doesn't include the civil. And my civil case against him is actually going to be much, much bigger. But I want to wait until he's pinned down before I initiate that again after multiple attempts. And I don't consider these attempts failures. It's a learning process, navigating the system, and I got a lot further than anybody that I sought advice from thought I would have gotten. We won't get into that now. I was just getting a little sidetracked just thinking about his birthday and how long he's been my stalker. And I honestly would like to see him serve time. like at least 1 year for every year. Because you have to wonder, what did he actually screw up for us, for this channel? Well, quite a lot, if you think about it. And I hardly get into it because I never want to give him credit for what he's done, so I never let him know about his successes. That drives them on, actually. When you're, stalkers have a funny psychology. Like, for example, and this isn't the case anymore with smartphones, but generally they would call a home and you answer, it's them, you hang up. They call again, you don't answer. 10 rings, 20 rings, 30 rings. If you wait 40 rings and you answer it, then they just process this as, oh, I just got to let it ring 40 times. Like, they're relentless. There's something wrong with them. But this particular stalker has been using this weird strategy of trying to take over my social media and then write slanderous things about me on them. And they're not even good. Like, they're not even funny. And that's probably what annoys me, is that, like, I'm just not impressed. King Ravana says, Space Force closed Venezuela airspace. Oh, yeah, I saw that. We were looking at the building fires in China. It looks very 9/11-y. I mean, hasn't it been a whole month of this? Ever since Cheney died, it's been nonstop flashbacks to 9/11. And it's been in a very concerted way. And we could go through all of it now, but it's pretty nuanced. I mean, from the 9/11 coded plane crash, Dick Cheney's death date, very significant, November 3rd, to the mayor of New York, a UFC fighter named Islam winning in Madison Square Gardens, FAA flights grounded, thousands of flights grounded, white powder at that, was it Joint Anderson Air Force Base or something? Firemen getting injured in an explosion. And this has all just been hyping up this very 9/11-y atmosphere. The reaction to the mayor brings out all kinds of 9/11 propaganda, rhetoric, tweets, and it's flooding the media ecosystem. So now against this, we're looking at these burning towers. And then a couple days ago, you have that Afghan immigrant shooting 2 National Guardsmen just in time for Thanksgiving. And then that was hyped up and politicized by not the woke right. See, the woke right is anti-Israel, but they're not anti-Islam. So it's the mainstream Republicans who get into this narrative of Islamic terrorism. In fact, Laura Loomer claims that the woke right is just trying to distract people by blaming Israel in order to give aid and cover to the Muslims who are infiltrating, who are going to actually take over. Dop Lardum says, China is falling apart, make no mistake. I only know what I've seen on the internet. And I remember in 2020, they had these people who were just conveniently being recorded anonymously by crappy cell phones from across the street. And they would just like fall on their faces, and just instantly ambulance would come up and the guys in the spacesuits would come out and then put them in the back and take them to quarantine. Or the people who were welded in their apartments. I mean, so we saw this real comical rollout of pandemic, like, it's propaganda agitprop. I thought it was meant, I was like, wait, does their propaganda just suck over there compared to ours? Like, are we hypercritical where we don't find Sandy Hook convincing, but then we look over there in China and they find this COVID theater to be alarming? But apparently it convinced everybody here as well. So I've noticed something too, because lately we've been refining our process here. And there's some fake media critics or something. I mean, they're engaging in some real criticism, but then they direct it and redirect their followers into mainstream politics. And they're very subtle. And some of them fooled me after Charlie Kirk because they were willing to call it fake. But we've observed them, and we see how eventually they end up saying it was Israel's fault. I'm like, what do you mean? did the Mossad sneak into Charlie Kirk's hotel room at night and put a squib on him? And then they squibbed him? And then he was dragged off? I mean, how do you blame a fake event on Israel in this case? It doesn't make sense. It falls apart. It hardly makes, it's incoherent at that point. Like, either you buy that he was killed by Tyler Robinson, that he was killed by Netanyahu, or he was not killed at all. Like, those are the options. And if you're saying he wasn't killed, then you've already excluded the first two. Because the basis for saying he wasn't killed at all is the off-world stage perspective, which is inclusive of media fakery and the continuity of these fake events on an ongoing basis, that they're all connected. Butler's connected to Charlie Kirk. So that's not a very coherent take when you take this wider look at it. It makes no sense. So I'm watching this person, and they're posting images of one of the National Guard's members who was shot and killed, the girl. And she said, in this like engagement bait, you know, it's almost as bad as the Q people who say, "What do you see?" And it's like a zoomed in picture on like Kamala Harris's neck. It's like, I don't know. Like, what? And then they get you talking about it, and you're trying to figure out, well, what do we see? Well, it was one of those where she posts 4 pictures of the National Guard woman's face and says, "I'm getting so sick of this." And what does that mean? Well, she was implying in her follow-up comment that the person doesn't exist. So I'm going, wait, how am I supposed to take this from these 4 photos? So I'm looking at these 4 photos. 2 of them, she's wearing a hat. 2, she's not. And she's hiding her forehead. You know, kind of pronounced. You could say 5 head. And so the hat significantly changes her look. And her eyes look completely different with the hat over it versus exposed to the light. And then in the earlier pictures, her eyebrows were thicker and they had been plucked. But it was the same person. There was no reason to really doubt that it was the same person in the 4 photos. So when she comments with this saying, "I'm getting so outraged by this," I'm like, what are you even doing here? You're pretending like this is some kind of insightful comment when it's just lazy analysis. But what it reminds me of is The Emperor's New Clothes, where everybody in the chat who wants to act like they're in the know is going to pretend like, "Oh yeah, I see through that photo." Oh, obviously. What do you mean? It's not obvious. And this kind of speaks to my point here about we can't rely on the visual information alone, the visuals with any fake event, to claim it's fake, unless you're going to assert that you have some special qualifications as a video analyst. Like, yeah, I'm just really good. I'm really specialized in this. I can look at the news and I can tell you if that's fake just by looking at it. That's sort of an appeal to authority, and it doesn't stand up outside of a closed echo chamber. So I'm pointing out that that's not good enough. Like, I like the work. You know, you can find questionable things analyzing video, obviously. But I think that it's going to be less of a possibility as things get better and better. As in terms of the video content, less obviously staged, the performances will improve. And then what? Well, if that's your only basis for discerning real from fake, then you're kind of screwed. You will not be able to separate it anymore. And my contention has been that when you recognize the world stage model as a closed system, and you look at the continuity of fake events going back through time, because there's a process here, predictive concurrent reinforcement. There's a process to how they graft these fake events onto our timeline. And if you look at the wider picture, the wider media ecosystem, without the compartmentalized view you're given, you can tell if something's fake by context. Hoax indicators, patterns, immediately implementable political agendas. Like, there's all kinds of things that give away the likelihood of something being fake. And you don't have to rely solely on what they show you on TV. King Ravana says, the trolls on George Webb's YouTube videos are relentless now. Most of the viewers are shadow banned. Who's George Webbs? I haven't been following that. I heard Tim Pool talking about how slow it is for politics and political commentary because nothing really big is happening. And he's suggesting that Candace Owens is doing everything for the clicks, and that's a consensus among his friends and colleagues. In other words, they don't think she's serious. But what she's been doing lately is mostly engagement bait, and I would say maintaining this plausible deniability. She's the queen of gaslighting. The king is Tucker Carlson. But also about the fake thing. It's not enough to say something is fake anyway, because anybody with no qualifications can say, I think that's fake. Well, then you ask them, well, what is the basis for saying it's fake? Like, what are your 5 reasons? And if they can't give you reasons, then what are you to make of their statement? It's unserious? No, it's low information. So you have low information belief. I saw it on TV, it's true. You have low information disbelief. I saw it on TV, so it's not true. You see how that works? These are identical positions, and the commonality is low info. Low info and snap judgment. It's safe to say, it's reasonable to say, I don't know, for a couple of days at least, or I haven't made up my mind yet. But it's not reasonable to stand on that forever. Like, I will forever be ambiguous as to whether or not Charlie Kirk was shot or squibbed. I will never know. I can't know. That tells me that the person cannot rest on their own judgment. They're not intellectually independent. You're not an independent thinker if you're held back from making a judgment based on deference to the mainstream default interpretation, especially knowing what we know about mainstream media's actual function. Like, you should be able to have some certainty, or at least have a defensible position. But not taking a position is not valid. It's either cowardice or a false pretense of having an open mind. Like, I'm so open-minded that I'm not going to close-mindedly take a position. And I'm saying that that's not actually open-minded. If your position is in agreement with Wikipedia or ChatGPT, if it's safely constrained by the same guardrails, you're in a closed informational system. By definition, that's closed-minded. Your knowledge base is limited to what they have provided for you to make your decision from. Their context. Our context is inclusive of media's role in faking events, long-term, short-term, as well as media fakery itself. Our perspective goes outside of what they include in their list of options and acceptable facts. And since we go outside of their closed informational system, that makes our position the open-minded position. If you're not off-world stage assessing any of these events, you're actually not open-minded. And that's not a hard concept to grasp. You could have 50 different conspiracy versions of how Charlie Kirk died, but they're all technically closed-minded because they all operate on the assumption that he was dead, not the possibility that it was 100% staged, which would actually be consistent with every previous event that we've examined being broadcast by the same media. So our assessment isn't looking at this event in isolation either. All right, continuing. I see. You know, I was watching the first couple episodes of Stranger Things, and one of the things that stood out to me are the dates. And some other stuff I screen capped, but the main thing was the theme of the lockdown. So the end of season 4, which coincided with the end of season 4 with Game of Thrones, they have these scenes that are reminiscent of Fallout. It's like Westeros is burning and the dragon is incinerating it, and you have ashes raining down as the snow begins, winter's coming. And I said, that's a reference to nuclear winter, probably. Hawkins, in the season finale of Stranger Things, has the ground split open, and then hellfire comes out. It rains down like ashes, very much like radioactive waste. So then the place gets quarantined. So we're at the beginning of season 5. So they're living in quarantine of some kind, and the whole way it's portrayed, it seems to me that if they were to do some type of tactic, some kind of like high altitude nuke, EMP blast, or something along those lines, I think they would be able to justify pandemic style lockdowns on the basis of fallout. And I kind of think that's consistent with what we've seen predictive programming wise. Michael Lito says, hey, Tim, when will your signed books be available? I'm trying to order some. I don't have the funds right now, but I thought I was going to make a little more on the art. I sold 9 paintings out of 11, and I did pull my account out of the red. It was negative for a few months. So my account actually just broke even, and all the artwork is shipped. So I'm going to give it another go. Another week of art, and I'll sell it, and then based on the profit there, I will end up ordering some books. So it will be this month. In fact, I was going to go drive somewhere between here and Taos. There's this scenic view. You pull over, and there's this view of a canyon. There's a few views I think I could do. My landscapes actually sell much better than my weirdo zombie or demon face stuff. Like, nobody wants that crap. I get it. I get it now. Like, yeah, I would put it on my walls, but I'm not like the typical art shopper. Yeah, King Ravana, those cards, I don't have the money. I mean, the designs have been ready for months, but what happened was when I first ordered the books, I ordered a ton of them, several dozen books. It's like more than 50. And Amazon didn't process my payment that night. Over the weekend, they didn't process it. Monday, they didn't process it. And then some point after midnight on Monday, my gym bill went through. Then the Amazon billed me for some ads that I purchased a couple of years ago, which is weird. The timing is just off for me, which then blocked the order. And so I had to refund a lot of people, which put my account negative $500 and put the book order out of my reach. And then after that, I ended up walking out on a long-term relationship. So I'm kind of in between residences, just sort of driving around, staying wherever, but I haven't been stable since. And so right now I'm rebuilding based on the artwork. So no, there's no way in hell the art cards will be, or the PSYOP trading cards will be in a position where I can order them. And I even left the laptop behind that has those designs. So I'm going to figure it out, but it won't be soon. It won't be before Christmas, if that's what you're asking. Although it would have been nice. I do have some cards from one of those sets, I'm sure. They're in storage. I can look, but the main thing is the handbook for the recently deprogrammed has been released. So even if I was like Charlie Kirk for real, if I got sniped by some angry chemtrail pusher, because I don't agree with their theory, this is going to continue. And it will continue to snowball. Because what we're doing here is we're fomenting an intellectual revolt against an intellectually dishonest system. We're not pushing for activism. We're not trying to wake people up, because people they're in this thing, alternative or not. They're in this system. It's part of their indoctrination. It's built into their worldview. I don't think you can wake people up if they're still adhering to the program. It's something that happens by default. You have to consciously reject it to not be assimilated into it every single day. But when you've examined this from this perspective long enough, you kind of figure it out, where you don't need to watch the news every day to know that it's all agenda-driven propaganda if it's reaching a mass audience and it has certain attributes. Like, it doesn't take very long. It's not like we're confused. Like, oh, if we're not watching the fake news every day, we're going to get confused. We won't know. No, we know. We have the people who don't know are the truthers who are still being spoon-fed. And they're just waiting for the next big event. It's like they're addicts. Honestly, the truthers are like red pill addicts. They get some kind of a dopamine rush whenever a terror attack happens, and they can run out there and be the first ones to call it as a conspiracy. Yeah, the cards will continue next year or sooner, depending. I mean, I'm exploring various options. Right now, I'm working on ebooks. I found this, well, you know what Gumroad is, but I found this niche, a couple different ones that I'm checking out, and I'm convinced here that I can produce a few PDFs and increase my income that way. And I'm also looking at other things as well. I have to be careful what I say, because my stalker did burn a big bridge for me. It used to be very, very easy for me to go to any funeral home and get a removal job. Since I worked at a central care facility where we processed all the bodies for like more than a dozen funeral homes in the region. So we always had like 6 a day. But anyway, I had a good reputation with all these companies, and somehow this stalker of mine went to each of them and sent them emails with like things that I posted online taken out of context or purely fabricated. I don't know what. So that's why I haven't relented on this person. No, he knows everything. He even stalked family. He used to try to mess with me by sending me pictures of a dead sibling, and just like, he was really kind of screwed up at first. But once we doxed him, he kind of backed up on a lot of these tactics. But I have no reason to think he's slowed down. What he has done is he has actually acquired an email address of mine, and he used that to access a lot of my accounts. So I don't know who he's contacted. Like, this guy has gone through some trouble to screw with me on a lot of levels. That's true. He's the reason why we had 150 plus YouTube channels taken down. You see, he downloaded all the music that we played, and he opened up a secret SoundCloud account. And then he used that as a basis for claiming copyrights on all of my live streams. And he would get us pulled during live events. So he would give me 3 strikes, demonetizing my channel. And it would be this repeated theme where we would get 100 subs or 100 live listeners. He would pull us down. And he did this full time. Like, he was full time. He even had 2 people he hired who were in my Discord server who were stalking me. I considered confronting him in person. This guy works in the Trump administration. He's friends with Garrett Ziegler. He's behind the team called Marco Polo that hacked the Hunter Biden laptop. And I have actually considered that. I looked into him. Like I said, I definitely looked back. His brother worked for Pat Robertson, Christian Broadcasting Network. And he was formerly board of directors for EAS Myoplex, like the sports supplement company. And it sold to Abbott Laboratories, and now they do like baby formula. But anyway, he was on the board of directors in like 2005 when it sold for $320 million. His family's got a yacht. I mean, his mother deleted her Facebook account. Most of his family have actually deleted because of me. One of the things that I did was I looked into some genealogy website that scraped his family info. And I found out the name of his father, who was the secret password clue on one of his emails. And the crazy thing is, he had a team of people, and I posed as one of them in a spoofed email, and he revealed something to me. He forwarded me a whole lot of emails. He was like, this is how I convinced YouTube that I am him. So this guy wrote to YouTube's legal department claiming that my voice was his voice. He used an email address that was from a domain he purchased, made to look like me. And he forwarded me the exchange inadvertently. And this exchange was between him and YouTube, showing how he committed this fraud. I mean, it's really insane how far this guy went. But he bragged about it, thinking I was his friend. And it was at this point that he had alluded to his relationship with Alex Jones, Eddie Bravo, and Joe Rogan. All very interesting when you get into the background here. And that's why I think this is such a scandal. Ollie Goering says he's probably moved on to other targets. I don't know how this works. See, because he told me, before I doxed him, he told me he says he does work for the U.S. government. He trains FBI agents. So this guy is a stuntman and a Les Mills certified personal trainer. He had many celebrity clients in the UAE. And I managed to get a long list of them. I mean, I actually did a lot of retaliation, to be honest. I burned a lot of his bridges. So I've screwed with him back. And you know what? At one point, he had raised $30,000 selling these MAGA hats. Because, you know, like I said, this guy's working close with Trump. And so he was using Teespring. And he had sold a whole crap load of hats. And he was going to make a bunch of money. So what I did, and he was going to distribute a bunch of hats. So I created this fake account claiming to be the copyright holder under his name. And I said, this person's impersonating me. I just threw some doubt onto the veracity of the person's account. And I managed to get his campaign pulled. And I emailed him and I'm like, I just burned $30,000 worth of hats. Like, really, this guy should have left me alone. But, you know, I'm patient. And I told him such. It's like, I don't care if you're 80. You're in a nursing home. Like, you're gonna have to deal with this at some point. But there's a huge scandal attached to it. I can barely get into. It would take too long. But he's friends with Don Trump Jr. But here's the main thing. You're talking about one of the top QAnon influencers, the individual who started the whole JFK Jr. crap. Yeah, Q is JFK. And JFK Jr. is fighting the deep state with Trump. This guy started that. That's what the whole George News thing was. And he's never been exposed. And I think there's a scandal built into this when you look at how this top QAnon propagandist has been on Air Force One, has been at Trump's Bedminster headquarters, has been at Mar-a-Lago, in and out of the White House with Trump, friends with Garrett Ziegler, very well-known person. But the scandal here is that the White House press corps has had a Q person in their ranks since 2017, through 2020 and past January 6th and on and on. And this guy's had essentially 1 degree separation from Trump this whole time. And what we have here is evidence that the QAnon psyop was actually run out of the Trump White House. Like, that's the real scandal. So it's not about his stalker gig, because before he was doxxed, he told me that he worked for the government, but that he was stalking me for fun. So I don't know. I don't think I'm actually an assignment. But I thought about that as well, the implications. You know, because if you're using government resources for some private venture, I don't know. I mean, to me, it's a huge can of worms. And it's really, actually, it's a barrel of worms. Like, this thing is a mess. And it directly connects very significant influencers in alternative and truther media. Like, we're talking, the fact that he's connected to Joe Rogan is highly significant. Alex Jones. So Alex Jones and Joe Rogan would both have therefore have known that Q was a psyop run by Trump this entire time. He's a very inconvenient person to exist. Go into your comments. Unmitigated Mind says, weird to me how often people brag about the underhanded things they do. They do it often and think people look them up for it. Yeah, that's what caught this guy. We would not have known who he was because all I had were encrypted email addresses, and there was really no way to find out anything. I guess one of the ways I got him was, he bragged about working for that company when it sold. And then I looked into the company. I looked who was on the board of directors, who it sold to. And eventually what we came across was a number of points that just repeatedly hit. I was like, okay, this is him. Now, this guy has a background in Hollywood. He was an extra on a number of big budget movies, like the Two Towers, Lord of the Rings, Fast and Furious, and a number of other ones. I tried to get his actor's reel from some company in New Zealand, but they didn't give it to me. But I got tired of investing my time and energy into counter-stalking a stalker and trying to make his life problematic. So instead, I just decided, let me turn this over to the legal system and the courts and let them deal with it. And I've piled on quite a lot. In fact, the FBI, I gave them a FOIA request for every report that I've sent them, and they sent me a CD. So I have just a whole grip of reports that have been noted and documented going back to 2017. So if you didn't know, if somebody's committing cybercrime or they're stalking you or something like that, you can report them to ic3.org, and it's all a matter of record. And they may not act on it right away. There's no way of knowing. It's certainly not like in the movies. Like for a while there, I figured the FBI is just a big filing cabinet somewhere, and that they just take your reports and they put it in this filing cabinet. It may as well just be a bottomless pit. So don't think anybody's going to come out and save you. My objective here is to get the court of public opinion to convict this guy, to expose it. And I've submitted all of his info to people, but nobody's ran with it. Nobody's touched it. It's really peculiar. I had a conversation with Mike Rothschild, who's the author of Q, The Coming Storm, Jewish Space Lasers. He testified at Congress about Q. So this guy's the inside expert on Q and everything related to the movement. And I interviewed him when I was doing the Dark Matter radio. And what he said to me was, I don't think that's anything. It's just a fringe thing when I mentioned the JFK stuff. Because I mentioned it before it got popular. And then I asked him, well, what do you think about this? This guy here started the JFK narrative within the Q movement, and he's in the White House press corps. And he works directly with Donald Trump. And he ignored it. And I thought, that's so strange. I gave this guy a clear lead. I vindicate his whole thesis here about how the QAnon movement is a MAGA thing that likely, but I guess he didn't want to go that far. Like, they want to make it look like it's grassroots. And for some reason, he was kind of maintaining that. There's nothing grassroots about any of this stuff. Like, are there any real grassroots movements, or is this all just AstroTurf? That's why you have people like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens on the world stage. They pretend to be populists. They're like, oh yeah, we're one of you, and we're going to lead you. It's like, well, both of you have what, net worth in the hundreds of millions? These people are elitists, and they're playing roles. You know what's interesting? Tim Pool was talking about Candace Owens and how the consensus among he and his friends is that she's basically getting all the clicks because there's nothing going on in politics, and that she's just doing it for the clicks. So they're all just admitting that she's basically acting. She doesn't think the French government has hired the Mossad to come up with the scheme to take her out for saying that the French president is married to his own father. Like, I get his point here, though. Like, that she's obviously LARPing. She's acting. And I think that's funny because he's right, but she's always been acting. This entire thing is an act. She's not acting for clicks. She's playing the role of a podcaster acting for clicks. Her entire thing is a role. Married to the dad. Yeah, I guess her theory evolved to where Bridget Macron is actually the father of the president, and is he the uncle or the father? I think he's the father. I mean, I don't know. I'll leave this up to the crotch zoomers to figure it out. The vestigators. Another unfalsifiable conspiracy trend It's more akin to like phrenology than anything. One of the things I noticed from the very beginning when I started getting into this area of podcasting is the anti-science mindset of the average conspiracy theorist. It's like, don't you realize that you're trying to engage in the rudiments of a skeptical methodology, which is basically the scientific method when you're questioning the news? And to be anti-science in this is not a strong position. We should be methodical. We should be fact-oriented. We should be testing claims. And when people run around with some model that's unfalsifiable, I'm like, you've gone outside the bounds of logic and reason and measurable, testable, modelable phenomena. And that's why I've been hitting the gematria people a little bit here. And apparently there's some like thread somewhere where they're saying mean things about me, probably because my name adds to 666 or something. They'll find a way. They'll find a calculator and they'll find some way. Oh, he started his podcast on this date, and 66 months and 66 weeks and 66 days and 66 minutes later, he said this bad thing about our calculators. So if you don't know, gematria is okay. It's already fallacious. It's Texas sharpshooter fallacy. It's selectivity bias. It's this retconning events in order to create the perception of meaningful connections. Now, these are fake connections. I mean, they exist, but they're not meaningful. They're not statistical anomalies. So they're psyching themselves out. But this whole concept of taking words and their associated numerical values and making connections to other words, all of that stuff is designed for rabbis going through the Torah to take a verse and another verse somewhere else and make some connection with the numbers and say, oh, look, evidence that God wrote this. So it's evidence of a divine order. Well, no, it's actually evidence of logical fallacies that you haven't seen through that are somehow working on you still. This technique of gematria and its application to the news is kind of a new phenomenon. I mean, the OTO, the various pagan groups, they use it, but they don't use it to decode the news. But they do use it to associate levels of meaning to their ritual props and everything, but it's not an objective way to measure reality. These aren't calculators that measure objective reality. They allow you to essentially find correspondences, but these aren't correspondences that are evidence of a divine hand. It's just random. Yeah, okay, Zach Hubbard. Well, Zach Hubbard has a way of making every news story add to 201, which he claims is Jesuits, and that Jesuits are Jews. It's always the same thing. And one of the other points here that they all seem to miss is that if you can use Jewish gematria to decode terrorist attacks, well, then who do you think's behind the terror attack? Hint, they're not using Norse runes. No, the fact they're using Jewish gematria automatically implicates Jewish gematria technicians, whatever you call them, are somehow coding the events, the terror attacks. And Zach Hubbard is not an auto hoaxer. He believes that people die in psyops. These are human sacrifices. These are rituals. So sacrifices, rituals, it's just sort of this blood libel theme. But it all leads to the J pill. And a lot of red pill does. So if you don't know what J pill is, it's how on the far right, the whole woke right phenomenon, it's built around this idea that the world is being controlled by Israel. That's why they say America first. What do you think they mean by America first? Because they're never direct in what they say. It's always dog whistled. It's always innuendo, insinuation, or they say something with a meme attached, so it's a joke. They can never be explicit. But when they say America first, they mean not Israel first, because their implication is that America is second, Israel is first. That's why they were so desperate for the release of the Epstein files, because that's going to be proof that the Mossad controls every American politician. But yes, Zach Hubbard is a gematria person who supposedly you figured out how to talk to God directly. Like, look, I can read in the news events evidence of this divine mystical order. Let me use it for sports gambling. Like, I'm sorry, that doesn't really comport with me. I don't understand that. You're using mystical Jewish gematria calculations on sports to place bets. But the whole thing is, it's a misperception, because what they're doing is they're using the calculator to gather the data that supports their initial claim. That's the opposite of the scientific method where you follow the evidence. No, these guys start with the premise. Like, there's going to be a connection here. I just got to find it. And it's not on my standard calculator. Let me try the reverse English ordinal Chaldean satanic calculator. Oh, there, I got it. And they're so sloppy now with the new system. And this is a new one. They've evolved to now they count days between events, but they no longer honor 12 months in a year, 7 days in a week, 4 weeks in a month. Now they will play with the numbers in such a way that it's like 66 weeks and 66 days, or 6 months and 66 days. I'm sorry, well, that's 6 months. 68 months and 6 days. Like, you can't do that. But they do. And I call them out for using a flawed methodology. And what do? They get mad at me. But my contention here is that this is not organic. If you look at the pattern here, anybody who notices predictive programming, concurrent programming, rigged media at large, if you notice this stuff, what do you think happens? You get mixed in with all these other people who take your connections and make it look crazy. So they're muddying the waters, is what they're doing. They're adding noise to signal. And this is another reason for creating a third branch of media. If you have a gematria calculator, our TSA is not going to let you in. You try to get off world stage, we're going to pat you down for gematria calculators. Because if we exclude them, we exclude this irrational methodology that distracts from the fact that man is using propaganda versus man. We don't need to add all these crazy connections that insinuate higher powers at work. Mystification. Dark Ghost Win says, JQ becoming mainstream convinced groypers that people are, quote, waking up, instead of the more obvious reality that it's a psyop. Yeah, I hear so many people saying this, like everybody's noticing. Yeah, everybody in your echo chamber. But now you have a National Guard person getting killed by a Muslim terrorist, and now the mainstream Republicans are the loud voice in the room. And they believe that Muslims are taking over, that Qatar controls Fox News. It's the same argument, different scapegoat. Plain Dakota says, I disagree with you on a little bit of the gematria connections. Here's the issue, though. It's the methodology is the problem. Like, there may very well be symbols deliberately inserted into events that may have some significance, but their methodology of crunching these numbers and using multiple calculators is just simply not valid. But yeah, there may be symbolism. There's undeniably the use of numbers and symbols and colors and archetypes. It's actually quite apparent that there's a subtext to it as well. But I'm saying that all these people who are using gematria calculators have a flawed approach and their presuppositions are wrong. And we need to go ahead and make that a point that, hey, you're actually going about this in the wrong way. And why does it matter? Well, because as long as you're going about it the wrong way and you're not exposing the world stage as such, as long as you're feeding into the alt media, propaganda slop mill, you're actually part of the problem. And people don't want to hear this. If you're a anti-geoengineering, you're part of the problem. If you're carrying water for the PSYOP entertainment complex, if you're a propaganda mule saddled down with red pills, you're working for the enemy. And at some point, people need to have this brought to their attention so they can decide. Like, do I want to continue to work for the enemy like a stooge, a useful idiot? Or do I want to be an independent thinker? And many of them do have good findings, but they're they're taking this data and they're processing it incorrectly. And this is why I started blocking these people, because they're taking the connections that I'm making with Hulu's The Tempest and Erica Kirk, and then they're running Erica Kirk's birthday through a gematria calculator and some calendar date calculator and making connections between her and the introduction of Miss Piggy onto the Muppet Show. And the connection has to do with 16,000 months and 66 weeks. And I'm sorry, but those numbers, those sequences, that way of describing that period of time is nonsensical. And so I'm like, why do I want to be associated with these schizoid X shit posters? And I'm suggesting again that this is actually what you'd call an active measure. So if there's a group of people you want to destroy the integrity of this group and their ideas and any sort of a movement coalescing around it, what do? Well, you target it with certain things. So for example, anybody who looked into the NASA criticism are now being called Nazis because the most prominent spokespersons are basically Nazis, or at least they pretend to be with some of their opinions. I mean, what you saw with, for example, Eric Dubé, he came out in favor of segregated continents. And I'm like, wait, you're the biggest voice in this topic criticizing NASA, and now you're going to focus on hating Jews and advocating for continental segregation? Meanwhile, you live in Thailand and teach yoga and eat vegan. So he's like very multicultural and eclectic personally. And he's not having a bunch of kids in Europe to save the homeland or whatever, but the fatherland. No, he's out there in Thailand adopting somebody else's religion and culture and practices and diet and living this life, meditating up on a mountain. And yet he's saying to everybody else, hey, get into your continent. Europe is for Europeans. Africa for Africans. And he goes down the list in his Jew World Order video. So anyway, my point of it is, this has been a pattern. Why do you think they had Owen Benjamin speak at the Flat Earth Conference? Because they knew the Daily Beast would attack him for all of his opinions. Same thing with Logan Paul. Logan Paul was known for, at that point, electrocuting dead rats and videotaping dead people hanging in the suicide forest in Japan. So he was known for bringing that kind of content to 20 million followers who are mostly under 18. So he's got like a youth audience, and he's feeding them this, I guess you would call it degenerate content. And there were memos behind the scenes at Google Video at the time, and they said that he was the poster child for why they needed to start censoring content. So then they bring him out to host the Flat Earth Conference. And that looks like more of the same. Hey, look, he's trying to sell this stuff to your kids. So you could see how any kind of alternative think tank or movement gets associated with some ideas that the mainstream public will reject automatically in the face of it, just by putting somebody in front of it. So this is like a standardized thing. And then they fill up the movement with religious nutcases and a bunch of people with very shady backgrounds. So let's say the media took a closer look at the speakers at the Flat Earth Conference. Well, what are they going to find? 5 out of 6 of them are sex offenders. How did that happen? Well, then you kind of get this idea that, okay, it seems like the main influencers are federal informants and doing intel for the Denver police, for example, and they're given these individuals to work for them and become representatives of this particular group and then turn it into a government-controlled honeypot. And that's what we're seeing everywhere. Every major conspiracy theory demographic out there is some kind of a limited hangout operation / honeypot. Not unlike the UFO movement in general. If you haven't seen Mirage Men, I recommend it. It's about how the Air Force put special agents into some conspiracy theorist's personal life and fed him a bunch of misinformation and started the UFO culture. So the UFO culture really is about these space brothers who are going to come down and give us technology. They might abduct you and do things to you. and there's underground bases where hybrids are being bred between aliens and humans. If you've heard any of these stories, it all came out of the Air Force. They created this mythology. It's not even a secret. UFO mythology is an invention of the Air Force. And the big UFO conspiracy pushers are informants or 1 degree separated from the intelligence agencies. And their objective is to control everyone's minds, especially, I'd say, on the fringe. They don't want any ideas of skepticism to take hold. They want a bunch of compartmentalized demographics who are passively consuming propaganda. Dark Ghost Wind says the Area 51 story is a repackaging of the story of Shemyaza and Azazel. Yeah, I think there's a lot of correlation here between the angels and the aliens. Like, angels are for the traditional minded. Aliens are this form of an angel that atheists can believe in. So the atheists have certain superstitions and religious beliefs that they have accepted because they're told it's science. And there's not a aspect of it that isn't borrowed from the old myths. So you do have, like, good, elevated, technologically sophisticated aliens who might save us. And then you have the darker kind, like the demon types, like from the movie Aliens, the ones who jump out of your stomach and, like possession. Then you have, this alien hybrid thing, science fiction-y stuff where it's still pretty dark, X-Files stuff. And that's all fallen angel mythos repackaged. It's not a coincidence that the right has reframed the whole alien thing as demons, and that it helps keep this division between progressive and traditional. So now the angels to the left are demons to the right. And the angels believed in on the right are seen as archaic, superstitious nonsense by the progressive left. Dark Ghost Wind says, have you noticed that ever since Elon's mention of it, pundits have said stuff like we could be colonizing Mars if not for immigrants? No, I haven't heard that, but I was actually tweeting at Musk a couple months ago, and I said, what races are going to be allowed on Mars? And it's a serious question. I mean, this has been addressed before when they talk about generational ships. I think even Bezos may have referred to this, how for maximum immunity, you want diversity and all this stuff. But it's a valid question, because if you're going to advocate for ethnic nationalism on Earth, then what are you going to advocate for on Mars? A lot of science fiction deals with how are we going to treat Mars? Is Mars going to be a progressive utopia, or is it going to be space capitalism? Like are we going to take our American political and economic system to the stars? And a lot of the morality plays, if you look at these science fiction movies, it always makes the case. Like, look at Wall-E, for example, that unmitigated capitalism destroys planets. Or even anything by James Cameron, the Avatar series, it all rests on the premise that when we go to space, we got to leave this stuff behind. No overconsumption of fossil fuels. We got to recognize the planet's alive. No toxic masculinity to Mars. So this is actually kind of part of a culture war thing. And this was very apparent in the Netflix documentary Mars, where you have the female-led group of scientists who go to Mars and they find life. Then you have the males, and this is funny because it's all from a Texas space base, which is, I think, even before Musk went to Texas. And they go from their Texas space base to Mars to drill for oil. And they cause an earthquake and kill the newly found life on Mars. So you have this toxic masculinity, and then you have the feminists with their appreciation for life and treating Mars in a way that could be looked at as sustainable. And they end up having to save the males from their own destructive ways, the Mars quakes. But what they're doing here is they're making the case that when we go to Mars, when we go to the moon, we got to go up there as globalists, as progressive, as humanity, not as Americans, not as Russians. So it ties into the idea of space in general, like the International Space Station, as being a unifier, a worldview unifier. Humanity is one, because we do have a one world paradigm. We do have a one world religion. That's why I call it nasatology. But they're not actually going to take you to the moon. They're not going to take you to Mars. They want you to adopt Martian values. They want you to adopt the values that we're going to have to take in order to exist there before you even leave Earth. So in other words, Earth is going to be Mars. Mars is a blueprint for how they're going to remake Earth. That's why I've been saying it has everything to do with the new age, Aeon of Horus, the age of Mars. It's about this new global age, progressive, sustainable, scientific paradigm, but still very much a religion. But science fiction is replacing all of the traditional myths. And now we're just waiting on, I think, a few other facets, like maybe AI so intelligent that it gives us a pretext to unify completely. Now, they may fake a Mars base. They'll probably film it on weekends when they rent out the Las Vegas Sphere. You know, whatever they do, they're going to fake a Mars base, but you're not going. And when they're on Mars, they're going to be living in a subterranean base because it's not terraformed. They're not even going to go to the surface. What's up, Howard Boyd? Thanks for joining. So the idea here is with the one world religion, you need a unifying heaven, like a paradise. The problem is the Christian heaven is different from the Muslim heaven. It's different from the Catholic heaven and the Mormon heaven. So there's not a unified heaven. All these different religions actually have different gods and different heavens. They all try to use the word God like they own it. But if you actually go into them, there's really nothing more than competing worldviews. And what they have done with space is they have introduced a concept of heaven that transcends all of the previous attempts to monopolize this concept and eventual destination, this sales pitch. Because that's what religions do. A religion is a sales pitch. If you follow this, this is your eternal life. Behind door number 1, this is the Christian heaven. This is the Jewish heaven. This is the Muslim heaven. This is hell for the atheists. And all of these have been fought over forever. And people are very exclusive about it. There's no DEI in heaven. They're very, in fact, exclusive about it. And it really depends on how much you essentially pay. I mean, I think it all comes down to it's a business. But it's all fake. And space is the same thing. It's another fake utopia that they don't actually have access to. Or they're exaggerating, whatever it is. But everybody, no matter what their religious faith or even the atheistic view, they all agree on outer space is the future of mankind. We're going multiplanetary. We're going to go up there when we're technologically advanced. We're going to ascend from the earth and our divisions and our politics and our hate, and we're going to be unified up there in heaven. Because, you know, in heaven, there's not going to be any racism or politics. If you went up to heaven right now, the idea is you leave these things behind, these earthly things. That's why they have the astronauts attain what they call the overview effect. What they say is if you go to space and you see the earth from far away, you no longer see national borders. You no longer see different races. You just see humanity as one. And they say the overview effect is permanent. That's like enlightenment, elevation, the high priesthood. They've achieved cosmic consciousness, God's eyes view. Plain Dakota says 72 virgins sounds nice. I think that sounds like hell. Like, you hear about like Mormons and others, these, polygamists. It's like, I wouldn't want to be around more than one person at a time. I mean, it just sounds like a massive headache. Not to mention it's built on exploitation and inequality and control-based systems that are very repressive. I don't like any of the heavens that I've seen. Like, you're telling me if I go to heaven tonight, I get to have Thanksgiving leftovers with Jeffrey Dahmer? Like, they have no standards. Not that I would go. I'm not quite sure. I got to check the rule books. I got to see where I got to check my social credit score. Like, haven't religions already come up with the idea of a social credit score? Isn't that what confession is about? Like, you raise your social credit score by doing rosaries and making confessions. Dr. Bass, reverse psychologist, says, it's funny how the Bible treats women like objects. Lord God will coerce them to do things by coaxing them. You'll rich land, livestock, and many women. Yeah, that's exactly it. Property. But I'm of the firm opinion, and honestly, I'm not the one espousing fallacious reasoning and faith-based proclamations here. I'm just factually speaking. The God of the Bible is the Gnostic Demiurge. Like, Satan is a good guy compared to this guy. Like, Satan, Lucifer, these are all constructs, mostly literary anyway. But the God of the Bible is devil enough. If you really just read it objectively and you apply, you think if you're a psychologist and you're going to diagnose this, or if you're a sociologist, if you're just a modern person looking at it, how do you excuse any of it? But no, I do think in the Gnostic paradigm, they have a point here where they say that you do have this ultimate point of creation. Like, there is a creator, but it's not personified. It's abstract. Like, it's kind of like a Big Bang, but not something in the far past, but a constant Big Bang. Like, there's a source of all life. But somewhere between that and us is this intermediary deity or entity that refers to itself as a deity and demands worship. And they call it the Demiurge, which means the architect, the creator. I think the Masons worship this thing. It's described as having the head of a lion and the body of a serpent or a dragon. But basically, this entity is masquerading as God or as the creator. Not even as God. It's not even trying to pretend to be the good guy. But rather, it's the one who established the realm that we're in. Time and space constraint. And the whole point of it is that this being has trapped souls. And these sparks of light that their souls are described as sparks of light are inhabiting bodies, living in a false realm, a false reality, and that they serve the maintenance of the system like matrix batteries by worshiping this false creator. So here we are, worshiping the false creator, thinking it's God, and then the people who turn away from it are automatically, of course, the wrong ones, the ones who need to be corrected. So basically, we're hostage. We're hostages. And the hostage taker is pretending to be God, and everybody who's worshiping him has Stockholm Syndrome. And more than that, this entire realm is designed to deprive you of your soul spark. So it's all about harvesting it. So how do you escape? Well, you live as though you are an ensouled being, not a body. So you have to transcend the material in certain ways, philosophically. Like, recognizing the illusion itself is the major step when it comes to breaking free of its control. And the notion is that if you live your entire life as though you're just a product of the material realm, you get recycled. You don't escape. You don't achieve higher knowledge. But if you live through this realm and you awaken and you exist as that soul spark, recognizing it's in a temporary vessel, then you survive bodily death. So immortality, the idea of an immortal soul spark, is the thing that this place will take from you. You will lose your soul if you follow the system. And all the religions serve the system. And the God of the Bible is likely the Demiurge, like is your enslaver. And how many people say, yeah, I'm a slave for God? Oh, okay, well, your God advocates slavery. And then in order to maintain a belief in it and simultaneously try to maintain a moral high ground, people have to engage in all kinds of sophistry and rhetoric and apologetics where they're just making excuses for their abuser, which is typical. Now, if I'm wrong, then what's going to happen? Like, see, I'm not afraid to be wrong here, but I mean, the evidence is on my side. That's why I say I'm more of a Gnostic, because I do believe that we are, in fact, in the midst of a battle over our souls. I think soul suppression is the name of the game. And it's just ironic that the most woke people are the ones who are given over to the political cults, and they're engaging in idolatry, essentially. Jacques says, imagine if the requirements for heaven is just rebuking all the false doctrines. Heaven's going to be the IPS think tank with wings. Well, you know, there is a model here, though. There is an analogy between the off-world stage, the world stage, and cognizance of the matrix, or the worldly system, and the recognition of a transcendent point of view. Ollie Goering says, is there a point to kill the Demiurge? I mean, if you kill... Well, that's a good question. You know, actually, I read this ebook called God Killer, which had that as a hypothetical. This guy kills the Demiurge. It's kind of funny. I think what you do is you go off the grid. You get out of their controlled paradigm, and you recognize that spirituality has its own controlled opposition. But there's other elements to it as well. And I think it's worth getting into. And I've been kind of holding back out of deference to the religious people, because I don't want to hurt their feelings, their beliefs. It's like, I'm sorry, but you've been deceived by world media. You can accept that one. Well, you've also been deceived by world religion. And that's why I'm saying you can't wake people up. They're married to the system. It's baked into them. And hey, it's on them. If they get their souls swallowed up by some lion-headed dragon at the end of this thing, what can you do? You know, they're all just, they're on the train track, you know, and you see the train coming. You warn them, but you can't warn everybody. But I think there's something else too, and it has to do with our psychology. Like, is psycho-spiritual a word? Psycho-spirituality? Because there's a point here where I'm recognizing that if your worldview is perfectly attuned to the false world that we've been given, so in other words, your operating system is that of a believer in whatever you see on the screen, and a believer in whatever you've been indoctrinated with, never to question. If that's your operating system, you're going to work perfectly with this world. If you notice any patterns, or you have any independently experienced synchronicities or intuitions or precognitions, if you're plugged into the false worldview, you're going to say, well, these are just anomalies to ignore. These are examples of, you know, maybe I was mentally ill that day. But you would just ignore anything from outside of the false paradigm, as most people do. Most people ignore evidence if it's not within their closed informational system, because they're programmed to have closed minds. So I'm saying that a lot of the experiences that would fall into the category of spiritual get put into a compartmentalized system where they're either ignored or they're relegated to religion, which has no answers for them, or any answers it does have externalizes the cause. So it was God or some higher power. And I think that is part of the system here. And I think it's because we are not fully psychically integrated if we don't have ready access to intuition. Like, I personally don't think that intuition is something that happens passively once in a while. I mean, that's how it generally does, but I don't think that's how it's supposed to work. You know, sort of like the concept of the subconscious is relatively new in the longer scheme of things. Our understanding of the human mind is still kind of in its infancy, but it's a lot better than it used to be. And our understanding of what is true and not true, these things are based upon certain methodologies that we build into our, what you'd call psychoepistemology, how you structure your thoughts and how you process information. So there has been some advance in this direction, but we haven't figured it all out yet. And I don't think I'm an anomaly, but I've had a very active intuition for a very long time. And to the point where it's almost like I think that there's something structural in our minds that has been neglected by this system to keep our mental operating system perfectly aligned with the false worldview. Because your intuition will allow you to see through things that they present. So they need to invalidate the human intuition. So they invalidate the intuition. It doesn't exist. But what if what it's telling you is actually valid information? What does it say? So what I'm pointing out is that I think that we've been hoodwinked, not just when it comes to media and religion. We've been given a false paradigm, but I even think about our basic psychic structure. I think it's been somewhat maligned. The Gnostics had this idea that there were three groups of people. The helix, who were those who were of the world and were apathetic about the soul. So they didn't live at anything above the level of the material appetites. So like the average normie, happy with the world, would be a helic. Above them were what they called the psychics, not in the sense of the word we use it today. And the psychics were those who were a step above the helix because they could in fact perceive things on occasion, but their default was still very much worldly. But they had the potential to have a full-on separation from the world deception. And then the third group were the pneumatics, which I think it means spirit. And pneumatics were those who would be living at the level of the soul in full recognition of the false world, of the illusion, the deception placed over the spirit by the senses and by the world itself. But so you had, again, the helix, the psychics, and the pneumatics. And the majority of the people fall into the category of they're never going to wake from the slumber, they're of the world, and they can't be changed. The other ones on the fence are on the path, but they're likely, since they're still in this place, they're likely to get caught up in it and lose their souls, but there's a chance that they could save their own souls. The pneumatics, we're good. If you're off-world stage, spiritually, you're good. The world deception doesn't have hold over your soul spark anymore. But I think this is an interesting analogy to the model of the world stage divided into mainstream, truthers, and off-world stage, in that the great majority of people aren't budgeable. They're intransigent. And you do have a certain number of people who are actively seeking. So you got believers and seekers. But the question is, will they overcome peer pressure? Will they overcome the reflexive need to conform to the way of the world stage? And my contention is that the only people who have any hope of doing so are those who found their way into Trutherville and are just stuck in various cul-de-sacs, tripping over certain guardrails. They haven't gotten out of it, but at least they're making movements towards it. This is where it's at, says, intuition doesn't mix with the hive mind. Yeah, what's interesting is that, because I've been incessantly journaling since as long as I could write, basically. And I have so many examples in my past of where I would reference my intuition, even what I would term precog, but I would reference stuff, and at no point did anybody say, you have a point. It'd always be something dismissive, where I couldn't get any foothold in a conversation with somebody when I talked about synchronicity, when I talked about intuition. Nobody listened, nobody cared. And so if you require external validation to stand on your own, opinions or insights, you're not going to get it from the world. The world is going to ignore those, invalidate those, and get you to conform. But then I had a few instances where my intuition and precog insights had led me into situations where I realized, okay, I can no longer bounce this off of people who aren't even slightly tapped in because they won't get it. There's a qualitative difference in situational awareness here. So I moved on from that. And then I started getting online and talking to people in Discord and otherwise. And I started coming across a lot of people who could actually understand what I was talking about, who didn't immediately try to stamp it out. So then I'm like, okay, this is good. Because were we not connected by the internet, a lot of these ideas would just be dead on the vine. There would be no conversations, no dialogues, no research. These things wouldn't go anywhere because this system is inherently gatekept. And it's done so to keep us compartmentalized and to keep us in a state of psycho-spiritual blindness, I think. Yeah, but I want to start with the book promotion, small events. But yeah, we do want to do an Auto Hoax Con. The only limiting factor really is funding. But I suppose if I continue in this way and I just do it low budget and do a series of book promotions, the content generated from that will likely lead to an actual demand, because it's really about creating a demand. If they want it, if enough people want it to happen, it will happen. It's not like we're low on people. And the way that you fund such a thing is you sell tickets to people who can't be there as well, for live streaming. In advance, you raise the money, you get a venue. Plain Dakota says, Tim, you need that purple light to come into the center of your forehead. Yeah, it already happened, I think. No, there was something really strange regarding that. I was in a hotel room. I was staying in one by the beach in Ventura for like a month. It was a good deal. And I was working at a funeral home there. And I had this mosaic of the Eye of Horus. It was really heavy. It was made on a particle board. And I had acquired it under some strange circumstances. And I had it with me. And it was hanging on the wall. And then on the shelf, I had this book I was pulling off the shelf called Bridge to Light. And it was the book given to me by the Scottish Rite, because they no longer give you morals and dogma. So I'm picking up Bridge to Light because I was thinking about this idea of the fusion of the hemispheres, the sun and the moon, left and right, and the bridge between the hemispheres of the brain, and this concept of the third eye. These were all things I was thinking of that day. And that's kind of why I had the Eye of Horus up there. It's kind of what I was getting at the time. But I pulled the Bridge to Light out, and the mosaic fell, and a corner of it hit me dead in the middle of my forehead, like on the top of my forehead. And I had blood dripping down between my eyes. And I had a couple of other follow-up synchronicities, I would say, tied to it. But I had just read this account by Robert Anton Wilson of initiation rites and the knock on the door and the symbolism of the blow to the head when Hiram Abiff is hit with the hammer. And it's all about this idea of the fusion of the unconscious, like Jung talks about the shadow. But anyway, yeah, I did have my third eye mosaic hit me on the top of my head and it bled down. And after that, I had this persistent delusion, you could say, that I was tasked or that I had some purpose with bringing some kind of light to the world. And I didn't know what it meant at the time. I had no idea. I was like, what does that mean? But I did have this idea that I had this wider purpose. And what's funny is for a long time, I was having these synchronicities with the word voice. And I was like, I'm the quietest person. I don't talk to anybody. In no way do I transmit any information to anybody. I was very much quiet, always just keep it to myself. And the idea of a podcast at that point had never even occurred to me, or even discussing any of the ideas that I was immersed in up to that point. Because I was very much immersed in all these various ideas and these avenues of research long before I talked to another human being who could like nod as if they understood me. I mean, it's very alienating. But anyway, at that period of time, it was just a series of strange events had me convinced that I was being guided by something external. And now I don't believe there is anything external. I really think that intuition and any sort of these insights are actually part of the mind accessing your broader knowledge base, which is somewhat transcendent. And that the purpose of a lot of, mystical schools is unity, the unification of the consciousness from the earth-oriented ego that's geared for this world to the more expanded or wider awareness, which, the term superego doesn't really make sense to me. I'm not into the Freudian stuff, but I do like the idea of the mind being modeled in such a way as you can understand that we're more than just the aperture through which we perceive the world. And this is revealed in certain moments or through certain instances where you have these momentary glitches where something else is reaching through or reaching to you or guiding in some way. And my contention is that that thing is actually not separate from you. And that thing would be misdescribed by psychiatry as mental illness. It'd be misdescribed by religion as God or a demon. But no one has a good description of it outside of maybe Carl Gustav Jung. I don't see many who are in psychology who get into this idea that we don't have a full understanding of the mind. We haven't fully mapped it out. And it's not just about the basement landfill of information in our subconscious, but that there's actually a more ordered consciousness. And again, it's like AI with a knowledge base. But there's an aspect to it that is, I would say, in some way, transcendent. But of course, this is outside of the dominant paradigm, and it's in the purview of religions, and all the religions would disagree on this stuff because, you notice religions are like, oh yeah, pray to God, you'll get it. And if you don't get it, it's because God doesn't want you to have it. Then you do witchcraft, like that's evil. Well, what's the difference between doing a spell and doing a prayer? Well, doing a spell is relying on your own power, or not God, or not their God. Whereas prayer is you're asking the Demiurge for permission. Hey, Demiurge, can you please help alleviate this situation? Hopefully it works. So what is the difference? I think it's the same thing. But that religions have always wanted to take any kind of self-direction and then have you plug it into their hive mind. It's all about the hive mind, isn't it? Someone mentioned it. This is where it's at. He mentioned the hive mind and intuition. Because when you're tapped into intuition, you're getting information that isn't coming directly from your senses and can't be tested and verified by somebody next to you. So you're kind of on your own with this stuff. And I think this is why many times the journey of the mystic or the magician or whatever, it's always the hermit. There's always some element of solitude, like Muhammad in his cave or Jesus in the garden or whatever. You have so many examples where they go into some separation from the masses. And I think that's very significant. And they do it to hear the voice of God. They do it to hear, in the case of Muhammad, it was the angel Gabriel who gave him the book or something. But the idea is you separate from everybody. Even Aleister Crowley spent 3 days somewhere dictating a book. But the idea is that you have to be away from everybody in order to hear the voice. And I'm saying that this voice has always been misdescribed and mystified instead of recognized as maybe a part of the mind that has been decompartmentalized, but yet can be integrated if it's properly understood. Plain to code, it says, the Demiurge only helps people who scam and sell out. Capture the Loop says Mormon Jesus is so handsome. What about Trucker Jesus? The guy on those velvet trucker paintings with sort of a mullet. I've seen various versions. But which one is the real one? I've noticed that there's this thing here where there's various, like, you can find them. There's various ethnic, like Barbie. You have different Barbies for every demographic. It's kind of like that. These are meant to be ubiquitous, universal. You've never seen the trucker Jesus, like velvet paintings, like at truck stops? Maybe you haven't seen them. And then I was driving through Gallup, and they had this Jesus rules over Gallup, and it was Jesus with a sword on a white horse. So I've seen the fighter conqueror version. And I noticed that the far right tends to believe in the returning, conquering Jesus, not the gentle one. I'm like, well, which one is it? There's no uniformity. And I'm not really into the Gnostic idea, the Gnostic Jesus either. What are we doing for the anniversary? Which anniversary? Although, if we look at just simply the iconography, the symbolism, you can see how all these various archetypes or religious characters are reintroduced continually. And it seems like they've made gods into superheroes. And I don't think it's anything more than they want to create a universal worldview where everybody's got a hive mind. And so it's just syncretism where they overlap and they merge. And out of it, they consolidate. And I think Superman is a great example of this. Howard Boyd says, the kingdom of heaven is going to be in reality, guys. The real Jesus in Yahweh's name. You can book it. We'll see. You know, I'm willing to be proven wrong, but nobody's going to tell me what to think. And I think that the God's Bible is the lion-headed serpent dragon Demiurge thing posturing as the creator. And that we're living in some kind of prison for souls. Although, is it a prison or is it a school? That's kind of where I question here. Like, I mean, it's one or the other. Or it's both. It's like the Squid Games. Like, we live in the Squid Games. Like, there's a point where maybe it's just that stark of an outcome. Like, it's either you survive with your soul intact or you just get vaporized. Ollie Goering says, I want to see an oil painting of Jesus playing Dungeons and Dragons with an incel kid. Use ChatGPT. The nice thing about ChatGPT is that, or Grok, is that if you think of something, it will create the image for you. It's been a great leveler. People get mad about AI art. They get mad about stuff, but it's like you realize that it has elevated the quality of memes, and it has brought a lot of people into the realm of the visual arts who otherwise wouldn't have the time or the inclination, but they have the ideas. Because I think everybody's pretty much creative in their own ways, and not everyone has the time to specialize in every single medium. Capture the Loop says they stick to the scripts for control. Yeah, I like the term meta scripture. And we talk about the meta script, but it's essentially the script that creates the religious paradigm that we're in. And look, I'm going to make the case here very soon on a whiteboard for any new person that we are living through a manufactured history. And it's written, every single major event is written decades before they actually act it out. This isn't something that people are going to like because of the implications. And I'm willing to walk people down that road a little bit. Like, these are the implications. This is what it means. And the bad news isn't that bad. It's like, I mean, it's somewhat dystopian. Maybe it is bad, and I'm jaded from it, but I've accepted it. I'm kind of stoic about it. Anufel says, it's funny that you ask if it's a prison or a school, but looking how schools... Yeah, that's right. Schools and prisons are kind of... Now they have metal detectors at schools. The metal detectors at schools, clear backpacks. There's a whole industry that followed up after mass shootings. I was thinking that they should just do remote schools anyway after COVID. Why send people back? It's kind of hard to be a mass shooter if your students are scattered around town. But they need you in the schools to do the lockdown duck and cover drills. I don't think they could do that via Zoom. Well, this is where I diverge from the Gnostics. They see this place as a prison. And I don't think it is. I think it has other elements to it. I think there's a purpose. See, that's probably a controversial thing to say, but I do think there's a purpose to life. I don't think we're just an accident of evolution, that we just luck, randomness, we're a blip on the radar. This place is already here, and it'll be here after we're gone. Yeah, I'm not convinced. I kind of think that this place is here specifically for us, in a sense that I think it's human-centric. And I think that the universe doesn't even exist until it's perceived into existence by us. I think there's some kind of relationship there. I can't prove that part. And it's certainly not scientific. I'm not claiming that it is. But I think this is either a prison for us, or it's some kind of an incubator. Not quite sure. But I know enough to know not to trust any of the establishment explanations that rule out all of the evidence that I have affirming this that doesn't fit along with their pre-existing paradigms. Because again, even the topic of synchronicity, I've held back on it because there are so many people who will say it's demonic. It's evil. You got a fallen angel playing tricks on your minds. Like, no, I'm not going to be refusing to acknowledge information, data, research, observations solely based upon somebody else's opinion of it. And especially when the opinion of it automatically puts you in league with the devil. It's like, well, no, your God is my devil. Sorry. Like, you follow the Demiurge. I don't really care about your opinions about the hereafter. This is where it's at. It says the UFC fight was staged. Yeah, when Islam won in Madison Square Garden, UFC fight, 3-2-2. All right, well, my phone battery's about 3%, so I'm going to have to go. We'll be live later. I was actually just going to go live to say we're going to go live later. I didn't intend to actually sit out here, but I've been sitting out in my truck. I'm just watching leaves fall out of the trees. Things are so peaceful. This has been the most peaceful... How long has it been now? 5 weeks of my life? Yeah, actually, it's been about 5 weeks. It feels like it's been a year. I have not had any peace. I haven't had any sleep. I haven't dreamed in years. And then all of a sudden, it's like I stepped into a parallel reality. And I only did so because of my intuition, which I'm not going to talk about it here, the details as far as how, but I was more or less guided out of everything. And if I didn't listen to it, I'd still be stuck in some horrible, addictive, control freak cycle of psychological coercion and abuse. Hey, thank you, Ashy Dog. Appreciate you getting the book. And yeah, I'm going to do my best. You know, I'm not pessimistic, but I'm also a realist. I am going to do my best to get signed copies of the book available and get the PSYOP trading cards back into production. But I'm working as fast as I can. Exploring says, I see it as a kind of prison for self-termination and a self-controlled hell on earth, maybe respawning as an animal or souls go to a higher plane. Yeah, I think that could be it. It's an interesting question. I kind of want to continue this later. because I want to know what people's thoughts are about the subject of animals and souls. Because I have a lot of thoughts on the matter, and it's kind of interesting. The very idea of souls is considered to be laughable and absurd, archaic, and superstitious, by the way. So we have to remember, too, that psychology, that modern psychiatry does not acknowledge that. No, you're just an ape with a big ego and a lot of need for cope because everything is meaningless. And you're just a slave to biology. We're not even in a worldview where the soul is an accepted belief because it can't be measured or tested. But I think it can, but not in the sense of the way a laboratory would measure it. But I think there's other indicators. But whatever it is, I have questions that I want answers for, and the fact that it's still an open question just implies that I'm open-minded. Whereas if I had a holy book in my hand and I had to get all of my information out of it, I already have all the answers. So all of your facts that go against my answers don't get a place. So I just see religion as a way of closing minds, the way that media closes minds. Seems like everything here is about compartmentalization, and I'm talking about psychic integration. So compartmentalization, artificial walls, blinker your point of view, prevent you from seeing the big picture. And I'm talking about an integrated view, not just of media, but of mind, and then considering what this has to do with the purpose to everything. Because I don't think these are separate. There's no way we're ensouled beings in a false worldview, and then the controlled media deception or deceptions are separate from this. No, if it's keeping you at a level of fight or flight, physical insecurity, it's likely by design, and it's probably part of the same design. Like mass media is the earthly representative of the Demiurge itself, as the churches would be. If I'm not mistaken, mainstream media has supplanted and replaced all religions, so none of its functions are going to be any different. It's the Demiurge media, which is why you got the black cube, black mirror, the TV screen hypnotizing people in the corner with the false worldview, and it's always a cube. You know, the box TV. There's a reason why we see this symbolism so prevalent throughout all media, and it's because, yeah, it's serving the same ends. All right, we'll be back later. Thank you for your comments. And, oh, by the way, please subscribe. Apparently, if I say please subscribe, YouTube will favor me in the algos. So if I say please leave a comment, subscribe, or thumbs up, if I call for engagement, it'll pick that up. All right, we'll see you all later.